So thank you everyone for joining us here today. I am Marina Holtzhausen, part of the relationship team for LATAM in structured finance. On stage we have Richard Villarreal and Juliana Ayub. Richard is the future flow securitization sector lead, and Juliana is the head for the Pacific Hub in structured finance and RMBS in Latin America. Let's start with you, Richard. So what a financial future flow securitization is?
Sure. More than happy to walk everyone through what a future flow is. So future flow securitizations have been utilized by banks across the region for decades as an important way to finance themselves. And it's essentially a securitization of existing and future cash flows from a specific business line that generates hard currency for cash. Historically, these have been in the forms of diversified payment rights or international merchant vouchers. DPRs are typically remittances, so driven by exports, capital flows, family remittances, while international merchant vouchers are driven by tourism and business travel when an international cardholder of a credit card purchases goods or services within a particular jurisdiction.
Thank you. Is it possible for future flow transactions achieving international scale ratings above of the originator?
That's a great question. So in these types of transactions, certain sovereign-related risks are isolated, and therefore we don't apply our country risk criteria, which does allow these types of securitizations to reach uplifts above not only the rating of the bank itself, but in some cases has also pierced the country ceiling of certain jurisdictions.
Thank you. So Richard, could you briefly walk through how FITCH structured finance team approach to assigning future flow transactions?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, assigning a rating to a future flow transaction, I think, in my opinion, is a very collaborative effort between the bank group, which everyone here just heard from, and the structured finance team on the stage. The starting point for each future flow transaction is the issuer default rating of the bank itself. In a non-dollarized economy where local currency IDR is available, that would be our starting point. Second, the bank group then assigns what we call a going concern assessment score. Those two are starting factors that are both assigned on the bank group. Essentially what the going concern assessment score is, it assesses the going concern of a particular bank within its jurisdiction and how a potential bankruptcy scenario could play out and the possibility of that bank to continue operating during and post a bankruptcy scenario. That score ranges between a GC1 to a GC4, with a GC1 allowing up to 6 notches of uplift and a GC4 not allowing any uplift. And there's several factors that contribute to that.
Thank you. And now thinking about a ratings perspective, why would a bank benefit from issuing a future flow transaction?
Yeah, so in terms of why a bank would benefit from a transaction like this, so there are certain things, there are certain characteristics that typically a bank that issues future flow transactions have. Typically has a business line that's strategically important to its economy. It's typically a bank that has a very large market share or is an overall systemically important financial institution. In these cases, the going concern assessment score would benefit from these factors and therefore would allow a higher notching uplift. But why would a bank want to do something like this? Well, it is a good source of long-term funding for banks, and that's why a lot of banks have historically used this type of financing. Additionally, it helps banks diversify their overall funding sources. It helps banks within the region broaden their investor base. So international investors get to know the financial institution and have the ability to invest within these banks without taking certain sovereign and country risks. And in addition, because of the rating uplift above the IDR of the bank, it's typically more economical to do something like this than it would be for a bank to issue unsecured bonds. Yeah.
Thank you. And could you tell more about Fitch's experience rating future flow transactions in Latin America?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, Fitch, so these, first and foremost, these transactions have been around for decades, since the early 1990s. And I think it's important to highlight that Fitch has been rating these since the 1990s. We were at the forefront of these types of securitizations, and our criteria has evolved over the years, although over the last few years it has remained pretty consistent. And we've rated transactions across Latin America. Currently, our current rated portfolio includes financial institutions within Central America, the Caribbean, and across South America.
Thank you. So now it's time to our last question for future flow. So Richard, you mentioned the ability for future flow transactions to achieve ratings higher than those of the originators driven by their GCA score. Can you share some examples with us, transactions rated by Fitch and their rating uplifts?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look up on the screen here, you have examples, current rated examples of programs within the region. So the top of on the top of the slide, you have securitizations that are rated that are backed by DPR, so diversified payment rights, while at the bottom, these are typically they're merchant voucher programs. One common theme across all of the examples on this page are that all of the originators are non-investment grade, and the GCA scores do range from a GC1 through a GC3. I think majority of the banks that have these types of financings do fall within a GC1 or a GC2, but there is an example of here where it's a GC3, and largely driven because it's a less systemically important bank, although it does command a pretty large market share within its region. Even though every single bank on this page is non-investment grade, I think it's important to highlight that 4 out of all of these examples on the screen are investment grade. So, you know, I think to go back to a point I made just a bit ago, it ends up making economic sense for banks to pursue these types of structures because they are allowed, or they are able to achieve investment grade ratings, even though themselves are not investment grade.
Thank you very much, Richard. Now let's change the roles for a minute and go over RMBS. Juliana, can you explain a little of what RMBS is?
Sure, Marina. So RMBS stands for Residential Mortgage-Backed Securities. It starts with the client of the bank searching for a mortgage with the bank, but for some reason the bank doesn't want to hold this mortgage in its balance sheet. So what it does, it pulls into a pool of mortgages and do a securitization. They transfer this portfolio to a special purpose vehicle. And then, so it takes out of the balance sheet, and this special purpose vehicle will have tranches issued, which are placed into the market. Therefore, the banks advance all the payments through this securitization.
Thank you. And what are the roles the bank can have in RMBS?
So the bank can have several roles under the securitization chain. We can see, for example, as an arranger, sometimes the bank do not have a mortgage portfolio, but it can also help some banks to do this securitization. We have the bank as the originator, as most common we're thinking about here in terms of an RMBS securitization. And often this originator is also the servicer of the portfolio. So even though they do not retain the portfolio anymore, they want to keep the relationship with the client. So they do the servicing activities in this securitization. You can have the bank as the liquidity provider providing guarantees to the Class A notes for the timely payment, or holding the bank accounts of the transaction. So there are several roles that the bank can play within this securitization chain, let's say.
Great. And now talking about capital structure, how does it work and what's the typical capital structure you have seen in Latin American Fitch?
Okay, so in Latin America, the structures, they are pretty simple. Usually it's just the senior and subordinate. Sometimes we see some mezzanine within this capital structure, but they are very, very basic structures. We usually rate for all the transactions, we rate the senior class, which is the one that goes to the market, but we can rate the full capital structure. Usually we have the originator holding the subordinate class to show that they have some skin in the game. This is something that we've learned with the past. So we have the originator holding the subordinate class, and sometimes there's a mezzanine that is placed into the market, but certainly the one that goes and it's placed to third parties is the senior one. It is the class that will have more enhancement, more protections mechanisms, therefore is the one to absorb losses. And because of that, is the one that has usually the highest rating and therefore the lower expected yield as well.
Thank you, Ju. So as we are in a bank event, I think they always want to know what are the potential benefits for a bank into securitizing their portfolio?
Yes, so there are several benefits of having an RMBS securitization. First thing that we can think about is the liquidity. So you're converting illiquid mortgage assets into liquid securities right away. So this cash can be used for new lending or other strategic investments. Depending on how the market is, maybe the bank would like to focus more on high yield assets and securitize these low yielding mortgage assets for the RMBS securitization. It can also provide regulatory capital relief, so you're removing these risk-weighted assets from the balance sheet. In case the bank wants to keep originating or needs to originate more mortgages but do not have enough space in the balance sheet, it can do so through the securitization, but it keeps originating and transferring this to a vehicle, so it would free up their balance sheet. And certainly, one thing that everybody talks about when we're talking about mortgages is the asset liability matching, because usually you have a short-term funding to provide funding to those mortgages that are 30, 40 years, as I was mentioning. Other things that we observe is about profitability, that sometimes people do not think about it, is because, let's say, if you have, as an arranger, you're going to have the fee income, but you also have the servicing fee. Usually those banks, they have all the structure to service the portfolio because they have several portfolios to be managed. So they have everything all set to service the portfolio. And when they do the securitization, they guarantee an ongoing revenue stream with this servicing of the portfolio. It wants to keep the relationship with the client, but also helps the profitability, because it can charge a servicing fee higher than the cost of managing this portfolio. So that's a very interesting thing. And the other thing that we notice for those banks that do the mortgage, the RMBS securitization, is that you're not only having a funding diversification or accessing different markets and having lesser reliance on certain funding, but also you're becoming more known in the market in different types of investors, and we observe that with the securitization, people get to know better the bank's financial practices. With that, it's increased transparency, and also we observe that it helps a lot with the investors' confidence. So it really supports the trust and reliance on the banks that do securitization.
Great benefit for them. And how about Fitch's experience in this market, in Latin America specifically?
Yes, throughout these years, we have rated more than 400 RMBS transactions. We have assigned more than 500 ratings, and the number do not match because sometimes we do have more than one rating into a transaction, as I mentioned before. And currently we have assumptions already published for Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Mexico. We also have assumptions for 3 originators in Ecuador, El Salvador, and Panama. If the specific country, let's say, we do not have available mortgage data to that country, we can work with the information from the originator to derive our assumptions. So that's completely possible, and that's what we do for this portfolio in Ecuador, El Salvador, and Panama. We have extensive experience in different RMBS products, even from home builder originated IGPM loans in Brazil. We have even autofinanciamento, which is like consórcio de imóveis equivalent. So it's a pool of obligors that finance themselves, but sometimes you have an BFI or FI guarantee those payments, and we have a securitization of that. We have assumptions published for all these mortgage related transactions in Mexico, whereas in Colombia. So there's plenty of type of mortgage loans that we have published in our criteria. Currently, we have a strong volume in national scale ratings. That's the main volume that we have, but we also have some international issuances that are usually linked to a note. The Class A note of the RMBS is linked to a note that is issued in the US that has a guarantee for let's say, from a multilateral bank. And because of that class can achieve higher ratings such as AA+, which is not possible for many countries in the region.
Great, thank you. And how is Fitch approach to our MBS?
Yes, so we included here in our presentation the criteria link, so anyone can access it through the QR code. It provides all the details of our assumptions, but I'm just going to give a very brief overview because of time. But what we do is we analyze the originator historical performance in terms of defaults. We also try to understand the prepayments. We ask for at least 10 years of historical information, but we can work with less than that. It's possible to derive assumptions of at least 5 years of information. We try to understand the underwriting and servicing policies from this originator and how is the foreclosure process, everything that is involved into that. And after we create a view on the asset analysis, we go to the securitized pool data, which is usually a static pool, and we define assumptions for that specific pool. Once we close and the asset part of it, we go to the structure analysis, in which we try to understand how the cash flows are allocated. If you have a over-collateralization, how is the usage of excess spread, all the mechanisms and triggers that you have to protect the most senior tranches. And with this transaction structure and the assumptions that we create or we define from the asset analysis, we put everything in the cash flow modeling. And then in the cash flow modeling, we apply several stresses to all rating categories to assess the reliance of those tranches to economic downturns and house price declines.
Thank you. If you could give more details to us about derived default assumptions, I think it would be great.
Sure. So this diagram that I'm showing on screen summarize everything that we do in the asset analysis. What I could highlight to not go over each box is we think that OLTV and PTI are the most determinant factors of default for a mortgage. OLTV stands for original loan to value, so how much equity the borrower has put in. But also the PTI measures the payment to income or the payment of the mortgage relative to the income of the borrower. So we think these are the main factors that define defaults, because it measures not only the willingness to pay through the OLTV, which is the equity, how much the person has already put into that loan, but also the capability of payment, because you need both. You need to want to pay and being capable of paying. So these two combination factors, it's what we call the standard BSF rating case FF, foreclosure frequency. And after that, we apply some adjustments. So we're talking about subprime borrowers. Prime borrowers are those loans with long-term, a long-term of 30 years, or they are 10 years. Are they payroll deductible loans or not, voluntary payments? So everything is measured through the adjustments that we apply. We also consider regional concentrations, and if the borrower is delinquent or not, because sometimes we analyze portfolios that have certain delinquency, and then this can override our statistical assumptions.
And how about the recoveries?
So for recoveries, the information that we use is relative to the property value, and then we can do some indexation depending on when the property value was, when the property was granted, the property assessment occurred. And after that, we assume some house price declines. We apply some foreclosed sale adjustment, which is quick. It's also called quick sale adjustment, or venda forçosa, or venda forçada. So how much you would need to decrease from that property value to sell it quick. We apply the foreclosure costs relative to taxes, notarias, notary offices in general, and then we get to the net proceeds. Once we get to the net proceeds, we compare the net proceeds with the outstanding balance of the debt, and that's how we get to the recoveries.
Lots of details, right, Juliana?
Yes, so there are a lot of assumptions and definitions that we do for each loan level, at each loan level, to get to the portfolio's estimate of defaults and recoveries. But the good news that I have for you is that we have our asset model public. Not all FITCH models are public and available to everyone. You don't have to it's free for everyone. It's just accessing through this link that we included here in the presentation. So you can play around and see how we would like, what would be the standard assumptions that we would see for, let's say, a Brazilian portfolio or a Colombian portfolio, and play around it and understand what will be our review on that.
So thank you everyone for joining us here today. Thank you, Juliana, Richard.
Yeah, no, thank you everyone for participating in our session. Definitely great being here. If there are any questions that come up for either our financial institutions group or for the structured finance group, we'd be more than happy to schedule a call, or even post-conference, schedule a virtual call to answer any questions.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.